It's official. Wait, move it a little that way. Okay. Hi, guys. Welcome back to a new live stream. First things first, I want to say that these live streams are improving in quality. My new camera for recording live streams and my new setup will be here within the next couple weeks. So I promise you my live streams will improve in quality. Okay. I know I get a lot of people who say they're like, oh my God, I love your live streams. I wish that the quality was better. I know, me too, bitch. Okay. YouTube lives are super difficult. They are extremely hard to perfect. So honestly, that's why I do these on Zoom, because Zoom is the easiest platform to do live streams on where it doesn't get fucked up regularly. Okay. So guys, welcome back to my teaching session. Welcome back to Raleigh's class. This live stream is going to be on why you shouldn't buy a horse. I know that, well, okay, no, let me rephrase. A lot of people, guys, okay, this is a very, very touchy subject for me because, as you guys know, I have worked at my fair share of horse rescues and worked with my fair share of equestrians in the industry. I know the turnover rates for horses that are dumped and sent to slaughter because of failed ownership situations. So this subject really, really gets to me. And we're going to be going in depth. Some studies I will be talking about will be linked below in the official re-uploaded version of this live stream. But today we're going to be going in depth on why you shouldn't own a horse or buy a horse and where you need to be in your riding if you do want to own one. Maybe owning a horse is right for you and you'll figure that out throughout this live stream, or maybe you'll figure out throughout this live that owning a horse is not for you. And I do want to say that I will answer questions at the end of this live stream. So just wait until the end of the presentation and I will answer questions. We can go over some things. If any of you guys have anything personal happening, maybe you're wanting to buy a horse or you have some questions about a horse that you have, I will openly answer everyone's questions at the end. Okay, so first things first, I think it's important before we get into this live stream just to say that this is not to say that every single person who are currently in these situations shouldn't buy a horse or shouldn't own one. This is not to delegitimize how much you like horses, because I get a lot of people who say, well, how dare you say that I don't like horses that much just because I've been riding for less than a couple years? Because I generally tell people not to buy horses if you've been riding for less than 2 years. And we're going to get into all of that in this video. If you get offended by anything I say, I mean, I guess that's really too bad. But I mean, no, just on a serious note, I do want to say that this is not to say that you don't care about horses, you don't love horses. And this is not to say that this happens to everybody. This is just what I see happening most often. These are the circumstances that I see happening to people the vast majority of the time, to the masses in the equestrian industry. The vast majority of people who relinquish horses, give up horses, sell horses, go through pony phases, the vast majority of them are in these categories that I'm going to talk about. So that's why I'm going to be kind of compiling everything together and generalizing it. If you are within these groups of people that I'm going to be discussing, that's not to say that you are like this and you don't care about your horses and you're going to get rid of them. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that this is the vast majority of people. So hopefully you guys can see me and everyone has joined by this point. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen so we can get into this presentation. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to, hang on, guys. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put this in presentation mode. Okay, so Welcome to class, everyone. I actually really like doing these. I know a lot of people make fun of me and they're like, oh my God, I feel like we're in Raleigh's class now. You are, bitch. And you know what? You don't have to pay for it or anything. So you're welcome. Okay, so today, obviously, why you should not buy a horse. And the main objective of this that we're going to be establishing is, are horses right for you? This is a question that I think a lot of people overlook. A lot of people view horses as a, hobby, sport, whatever, a plaything. You know, a lot of people view horses as something that they can have for a few years, compete, and then when they grow out of it, they can just rehome or sell the horse, which is a very problematic mindset to have, okay? So we're going to be going over that in this live. So first things first, we need to talk about the appeal of owning horses and why so many people want horses, buy horses because they jump the gun, and then they sell their horse, they relinquish their horse, or they, give up their horse, or even worse, they dump their horse, which is something a lot of people don't think that's a thing. And trust me, it is. The vast majority of horse rescues I worked at, a lot of people would dump horses, literally even just on the sides of roads and shit. People would just let their horses go or dump them or something because they couldn't afford to take care of them anymore. There's a lot of reasons that go into this, okay? So the appeal of owning horses, this is something that I blame media for. This is something that I blame shows like Heartland or Flicka. You know, there's so many shows and movies, and this is one of the reasons why I don't like it when online influencers go and ride horses and then sensationalize it. It's because here you have expectation versus reality, right? Okay, so many people think that this is what horse riding is. So many people think it's so much fun and beautiful, and there's nothing wrong with it. You have this great, amazing animal and this great life together, blah, blah, blah. In reality, this is a very good example. Just horses buck, horses bolt, horses rear. Horses cost a lot of money. You're going to go to the hospital a few times. There's going to be financial struggles. You're going to have the horse for 20 to 30 years, depending on how old they are. Horses are a lot of work. And a lot of people say, well, this situation doesn't happen to everyone. No, you're wrong. You're totally, totally wrong. That situation, this right here that you see, happens to literally every single equestrian. Every horse bucks, bolts, rears, kicks, whatever. It's something that comes along with the territory, okay? So the appeal of owning a horse generally comes from the media sensationalizing it. A lot of people, if you clicked on this video, you saw that the thumbnail for this video is Bertaley. You have so many people buying horses just like the Bertaley family did, which we'll get into towards the end. They get the horse for their daughter who is really into horses for a few months, and then literally after 6 months, they get rid of the horse. Nobody hears anything about the horse ever again. So that's a perfect example of this. Oh, no, reload. No, what's happening? Why isn't this slide loading? Hang on. No, oh my goodness. What's happening? Okay, well, we're gonna zoom in on this because this slide's not loading for some reason. So next slide. Sorry guys, for some reason, it's not loading. Next slide, we're going to talk about the risks of riding horses, okay? This is something that we need to talk about before we get into anything else, because this is something that is so unbelievably overlooked by so many people. Let me zoom in on this a little bit more. Okay, this is so important. And for some reason, so many people overlook this. So many people overlook how many people die a year, how many people are injured a year, how dangerous horseback riding actually is. This is something that is overlooked by almost every single person who is new to the industry or even has been in the industry for a little while. Okay, so many people think that owning horses is just this, beautiful, safe, amazing thing, and it's not. Okay, so you have over 100 deaths per year from equestrian related activities, okay? 10 to 20 times as many head injuries occurring for each fatality. Head injuries are some of the main injuries that equestrians get, which are some of the most serious injuries you can receive throughout your life is a head injury, okay? So equestrians not only are killed on a very regular basis, but also have extremely high head injury fatality rates for people, okay? So oh my God, what is wrong with this live today? Sorry, guys. Horse riding injuries affect approximately 37 or 35.7 persons per 100,000 population each year, okay? Which means that literally a third of equestrians are injured at least one time per year riding horses, okay? The vast majority of equestrians injured are between 10 and 14 years old, which these are very young girls. These are very young kids being seriously injured, with so many of these injuries being head injuries, okay? I think this is something that parents don't take into consideration when they are considering letting their child ride a horse or letting their child get a horse of their own, okay? Again, down here, this was from a study that was published by a veterinary organization, which I will link below in the official live stream once this is re-uploaded on YouTube. And that is, horse riding is a hazardous activity. Each year, horse riders are injured, hospitalized, or killed as a result of horse-related accidents and injuries. Despite technological advancements in equestrian safety equipment, horse riding continues to be found more dangerous than motorcycling, skiing, football, and rugby. Okay? I want people to take that into consideration before they ride horses and buy a horse of their own. Because let me be quite frank, the amount of money you're going to be spending in hospital and medical bills is a real thing that equestrians experience. That's something a lot of people don't take into consideration when they get into horseback riding, even if they're just doing lessons. You will be spending a significant amount of money on your own medical bills, okay? And I think people don't acknowledge that. Okay, let me see if I can finally get this to work now. We've been having power outages here all day, you guys. Okay, well, it went to the next slide anyway. Okay, next, the cost of owning a horse. You know, I wanted to talk about the deaths and the fatality rates and injury rates before we get into the cost of owning a horse, because I feel like personal safety is your number one priority for most people. And personal safety when riding horses and the actual injury rates and fatality rates of riding horses is so extremely overlooked. Nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about, hey, maybe you shouldn't buy a horse because of the fatality and injury rates. You know, nobody thinks about it. Nobody talks about it. So next, obviously, we have the cost of owning a horse, which is another thing that so many people overlook. People think that the initial cost is the most. No, far from true. So here obviously these are very loose bullet points because each one of these bullet points goes very in depth on expenses. So first you have the purchasing of the animal and the purchase vet exam. Everyone should be getting a purchase vet exam. That's an exam that you pay for when you're buying a horse or you're inquiring for a horse. This is something that so many people don't do that you need to do, okay? Because I'm going to be honest, as someone who has worked at so many equestrian rescues, the main reason why people will relinquish horses of their own, apart from financial reasons, is because they bought a horse that ended up having a bunch of health problems and they didn't get it checked out before they bought the horse. So guys, get a purchase vet exam whenever you're purchasing a horse. But on top of that, when you buy a horse, you have your truck and trailer costs, or if you're not going to get a truck and trailer, you have your shipping costs. Which is paying somebody to trailer the horse for you whenever you want to go somewhere, or renting a trailer. Then you have boarding, which is monthly, and feed and supplements, which is monthly. And keep in mind, almost every horse is on some sort of specialized supplementation or feed. Then you have your training costs for whenever you buy a horse, keeping that horse trained, and your lessons that you're going to be taking on that horse. Oh my God, what is happening? Then you have tack and equipment costs, which is very expensive. A lot of people don't take that into consideration either. You have to buy properly fitted tack, even Western English, endurance, literally any equestrian related activity that you're going to be doing on your horse. The tack that you have to buy for that horse is going to be between $5,000 and $10,000. And then you have to take into consideration the tack that you're going to be getting that horse that breaks over time, repurchasing new tack as time goes on. And then you have your monthly deworming, which is every month, depending on where you live in the world. Shots, which is usually seasonally, but it's multiple times a year. And farrier work, which is every 6 to 8 weeks. And depending on what you have on your horse's feet, it could vary in cost between $50 for a barefoot horse and $200 up to $300 every 6 to 8 weeks for a horse that's shod. Then you have annual vet work, which is just your teeth floating, for geldings or stallion sheath cleanings. You have so many others like teeth pullings from time to time. Annual vet work is basically stuff that is done to a horse once a year or twice a year. Sometimes people get their horse's teeth floated twice a year, which is expensive. And then you have your time, which is another big thing that people don't take into consideration. You have your own time that you're spending with the animal that you have to set time aside for. Time is money for a lot of people. A lot of people don't take into consideration that if they're spending 1 hour a day with their horse, how much that's going to take away from their job, from their kids, from their other activities they want to do, right? So your time is also equally as important as all of those. And so I would say, from my own estimations from owning horses, being around people who've owned horses for the last, like 17 years of my life, the initial cost that most people spend when they buy horses is between $5,000 and $20,000. Then you have your monthly costs, which are, I want to say, between $500 and $1,200, depending on where you live in the world and depending on what you're doing with your horse. That includes board, feed, tack, vet work, farrier work. So your monthly cost would be anywhere between $500 and $1,200. Annual costs are what you spend per year per horse. I want to make that very clear. This is not for any amount of horses. This is one horse, one rider, one horse. Per horse, your annual cost will be between $10,000 and $20,000, depending on what you're doing. Sometimes it can even be more than that. For a lot of people who show regularly, it's going to be way more. Or horses that have special needs is probably going to be more. So I want people to know that these are the costs of owning one horse per rider. Okay. And a lot of people are like, oh, whatever, I can pay for it. Yeah. Unless you're willing to spend. For a lot of people, they make between, I want to say the median income for the United States is probably, this is a rough estimate, probably between $50,000 to $80,000 a year. That's like a solid 20 to 30% of your income that you're going to be spending every year per horse that you have. So the vast majority of reasons why people dump their horses or get rid of them is because they can't afford them. And you have to keep in mind that horses live to be between 30 and 35 years old. So this is going to be something you're going to be paying for every single year for probably half your life. Just take that into consideration. Next, we have our unforeseen circumstances. I'm putting this in here because this is something that so many people overlook. I can't even tell you. People don't even think this is a thing. Whenever I was giving horseback riding lessons, I would literally print out pamphlets that I would give my lesson kids' parents whenever they started lessons with me. And it would be a pamphlet on every single reason why you should not buy your child a horse and what you should do until your kid is like 16 to 18 years old when they can get a horse of their own. Just because so many kids, I would honestly say every child I gave a horseback riding lesson to went through a phase where they were begging their parents to buy them a horse, right? Everyone does it. It's normal. I did it when I was a kid too, but I would legitimately print out pamphlets and it would look like this presentation that I'm telling you guys right now. And I would give these to my students' parents and I would be like, reason A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way down to Z on why you should not buy horses who were not able to do the activities that people wanted them to do, like they weren't able to jump as high, or maybe kids grew out of their ponies that their parents bought them, that accounted for 28% of the horses relinquished. 28%, that's huge. Oh my God. And behavioral problems of horses was also another 28%. So people who couldn't keep up with proper training, people who couldn't afford to send their horses to trainers to have them trained appropriately or keep up with training sessions or lessons. That's 28%. Horse owner related factors most commonly reported were financial hardships. 52% of people relinquishing horses relinquished them because they were not able to financially care for their animals. That's insanely high, you guys. Physical illnesses or death of the owner related to 27%. And then the lack of time for the horse was 16%, which is another thing. Nobody takes that into consideration. The lack of time for horses is a huge deal. You have to make sure that you can set aside a significant chunk of your own personal time to spend with your animal. Okay, let's see if the next slide will go into presentation mode, hopefully. Yay! This is so unprepared. I'm so sorry, you guys. Next slide is recognizing the pony phase. So now we're getting into this. Highlighted at the very beginning, this is not age specific. I think I can't make this clear enough. People think the pony phase is related to children, and it's not. There are plenty of adults who experience the pony phase as well, okay? And so I highlighted that at the beginning and bullet pointed what the pony phase actually is. So you can recognize the pony phase, even if you're an adult and you're experiencing this. You need to understand that you are a part of the pony phase, and this is not, I repeat, not a phase to purchase a horse in. If you are within the pony phase, do not buy a horse. I cannot stress that enough. Just don't do it. Don't buy a horse. And this is how you know that you're in the pony phase, okay? So if you've been riding horses for 2 years or less and you are wanting to buy a horse, stop and look at yourself. You are in the pony phase. You cannot determine how much you will want to ride horses or be around them if you've only been around them for 2 years or less. Okay, so the first 2 years you're around horses, riding, taking lessons, leasing, whatever, don't buy a horse. You are still in the pony phase, and you won't know if you're in the pony phase or if it's a serious thing until after that first 2 years. I always give people a couple years because it's very easy to pick up a hobby and be really invested in it for maybe a year or two. But after the first couple years, you have to really be into that hobby in order to keep doing it and keep it a consistent thing in your life. If you are a parent wanting to buy your child a pony, stop and look at yourself because your kid is in the pony phase, okay? I would honestly say, and this is a very unpopular opinion, I do not believe that parents should buy their kids horses because the vast majority of horses that are relinquished are, as I put down here, the majority of horses dumped or rehomed are companion horses that can't be ridden anymore due to health complications, or they are 14 hands high or smaller, meaning ponies, miniature horses, etc. Those horses are so often rehomed or relinquished to shelters because parents buy their kids a pony and then their kid grows out of it. Okay. And then they no longer have a purpose for the pony and they don't want to pay to keep it around because it's expensive. And that's a cycle. So if you're a parent wanting to buy your child a pony, stop and look at yourself. Don't do it. Okay. Another way to know that you're in the pony phase is you feel like you need a horse to compete on or a competition horse. A lot of people buy horses because they are like, well, I really want to compete and I really want to have a horse of my own so I can compete. Okay, what's going to happen if your horse can't compete anymore? What's going to happen if your horse goes over a jump and gets seriously injured and becomes a companion? Are you going to get rid of it because you no longer have a competition horse? Don't buy a horse just because you want a competition horse, just because you want a horse that you can compete on or jump on. You never want to buy a horse for a specific purpose because you need to take into consideration that something might happen over time and that horse might not be able to do what you want it to do, what you're buying it to do anymore. So are you willing to keep the horse past it not being able to perform at the level you want? Okay. Another way is you can't see horses long-term into adulthood. This is for teenagers and children. You have no plan for the future. You can't see taking your horse to college. You don't know what you would do if, you know, you went off to college, you became an adult, you just don't know. You can't see a long-term plan for keeping that horse around. You just see for the close foreseeable future and nothing past. Don't get a horse, you're in a pony phase. Financial instability. Nobody in their right mind, if you are not financially able, nobody in their right mind would buy a horse if they're not financially able to take care of it, unless they're in a pony phase and they just want a horse then and there, and they're not thinking about long-term financial stability, okay? Another way is you wouldn't keep the horse if you couldn't ride it. If you can't see your horse, or not your horse, if you can't see yourself owning a horse that is unrideable, then you shouldn't be buying a horse. I'm just gonna say that point blank, period. If you wouldn't keep your horse, if your horse couldn't be ridden, then you shouldn't be buying it, okay? Because the likelihood that something will happen to your horse at some point in their life and they wouldn't be able to be ridden anymore is significantly high. So, for example, my horse Link, if he were to be completely unridden for the rest of his life, I would still keep him, okay? And that's how you know that you're not in a pony phase. Okay, so if you think that you could sell a horse or rehome the horse when you're done with it, don't buy the horse. You're in a pony phase, because it takes a long time to sell a horse. This is something a lot of people don't think about. And this is another reason why horses are relinquished to shelters. So many people buy horses like ponies for their kids, and they're like, well, it's okay because when she grows out of it, then I'll just resell the horse to a new person. It doesn't work like that. Okay. Horses are incredibly difficult to rehome and sell, which is the reason why so many people relinquish them to shelters, because people are like, oh, well, I don't want to pay to keep this horse anymore. And their child grows out of it. And then nobody wants to buy the horse. It takes a while to sell the horse, and they're throwing money away each month paying for the horse to just be stuck in a stall. So then what do? They're like, oh, well, we'll just dump the horse or give it to a rescue because we can't find anything else to do with it. That's extremely common. Don't do it, okay? What you should do. So I know I just ripped the heart and soul out of so many young kids watching my video right now. I know, you guys, I know I was in the pony phase too when I was younger. Everyone goes through a pony phase, but it's what happens after the pony phase that determines if you should buy a horse or not. Once you go through the pony phase, if you still stick around and you still love horses and want to be around and all of that, then you can get a horse. I mean, then you'll know, right? So this is what you should do. For all of the people out there who think they're in a pony phase, you've been riding for less than 2 years, you're new to riding horses, maybe you want a horse someday, whatever, this is what you should do. I made bullet points for all the people who feel very disheartened right now. This is not to say that riding horses is not for you, maybe it is, and this is how you know. So first, when you begin, take all-around lessons. And I underlined all around because that's so important. You need to take Western English, whatever type of riding is out there. Experience a bunch of things in the equestrian world. Don't just get into jumping because you see it on, shows and you're like, oh, maybe I'm going to love jumping. Maybe you'll also love some sort of Western riding. You never know. So I always tell people, kids specifically, that take all around lessons, go to a bunch of different boarding facilities, take jumping lessons, dressage lessons, Western lessons, go and experience a bunch of different types of riding, a bunch of different breeds of horses, different types of horses and how they ride. You'll get a really good feel for what you want to do in the industry long-term. If you want to do Western full-time, English full-time, what types of horses you like riding. That's another big thing. Each breed of horse moves differently, has different personalities, is more high-strung or more mellow. You'll be able to experience a lot of different breeds of horses, how they ride, a lot of different types of tack, sports, types of riding, everything like that, different types of training, what you're interested in. So always take all around lessons for at least a year, experience a bunch of different things, whatever. Trust me, taking lessons is way less expensive than owning a horse. Trust me. Okay. Same thing with leasing. Leasing a horse is way less expensive than owning a horse. So I always tell people that after the first year of lessons, if you're an adult, I always tell them to lease a horse for at least a year. Find a horse that does the discipline you're interested in, is capable of doing the things you want, is the breed that you want to ride. And lease that horse for at least a year if you're an adult. If you're a child, I recommend that you lease horses until you're 16 years old and can get a job and partially pay for your horse. And you really know that you want to take your horse to college with you, et cetera, or you're older, you're an adult, whatever. But I always tell kids, it sounds bad, you guys, but I really don't recommend that children buy horses. I just don't, because the turnover rate is so high. The vast majority of horses that are dumped because parents buy their kids horses and then their horses grow out of them. And that's very important to talk about and go over. I also recommend that you exercise ride. This goes for a lot of kids under 18. You can exercise ride other people's horses for them. You can work at barns. You can shadow trainers and vets. These are all things that I did that I recommend that everybody does. Okay. It'll give you so much more insight into the industry. It'll show you all the, nitty gritty stuff that a lot of people don't realize or think about or whatever. It'll give you a greater appreciation for the equestrian industry as a whole, right? It's also really good for teaching you new things, etc. Get a job and be financially able to support your horse on your own. That's the moment that I would recommend people get horses. If you can get a job and you can pay to have your horse on your own, then I would say that, yeah, sure. If you're willing to go to that extent to keep a horse, then do it. Have an emergency fund. Very important. You always want to have money set aside for your horse if something happens. Don't rush into buying a horse. Make sure to find the right fit. That's another thing, is so many people, when they get into that stage where they're actually ready to buy a horse, they rush and they buy the very first horse they find that's pretty. Right? Don't buy a horse based off looks. Make sure to take your time, evaluate the horse, have other people ride it as well, have veterinarians go out and check it out. Make sure to really take your time purchasing a horse, okay? Don't rush into it. Be willing to support the horse for its life expectancy, irrespective of riding capabilities. So important, so important. When you buy a horse, you need to acknowledge to yourself that you are willing and able to take care of this horse for the rest of its life, the duration of its life, even if the horse may one day not be rideable. Have the time for your horse. Make sure that, another reason why I don't recommend parents get their kids horses is because when kids go off to college, they don't have time for their horses anymore, depending on what they're doing. So you really want to make sure that for that horse's duration of its life, you have the time set aside and you are willing to go down certain paths in your life to make sure that you can always set aside time for your animal. Okay. And at the very bottom, parents should not buy their kids horses. I know that's going to dishearten so many kids out there, but trust me, guys, you will thank me for this. You will, okay? Because I can't tell you how many people buy horses and get rid of them after a few years, and you feel like trash for doing it, trust me. And a lot of people do it. So I do not think that parents should buy their kids horses. I know that that's a sad thing to say, but lease a horse. Leasing a horse is the exact same thing as owning a horse. You just don't have to do any of the nasty shit that comes along with it. You don't have to pay for all the bills. You don't have to pay for all the veterinary work. If you're only interested in horses because of riding, because you want to jump or whatever, then lease a horse, because then you can lease that horse and do all the jumping you want. And then when you progress to higher levels, you can lease other horses that can jump at those higher levels, right? Like, leasing a horse is so great for those reasons, because whenever you grow out of the horse, you can get another horse and lease another horse that is at your new riding levels and capabilities. You don't have to be stuck with one horse forever, which is the beauty of leasing. So next, horses are a lifelong commitment, okay? Have the time for your horse and plan to keep them as part of your family, not a hobby or sport. If you're only interested in horseback riding for hobbies and sports, lease horses. I can't stress that enough. Lease a horse, okay? Horses are a serious financial commitment for 20 to 30 years, okay? Another outtake from one of the studies that I was reading you guys previously was there are approximately 200,000 unwanted horses annually in the United States. 200,000 animals that are unwanted and relinquished every single year in the US alone. Okay, take that into consideration. Many are shipped to slaughter, enter rescue facilities, or are held on federal lands. This study aimed to estimate a potential number of available homes for unwanted horses in order to examine broadly the viability of pursuing rehoming policies as an option for thousands of unwanted horses in the United States. So this study that I was reading into basically goes over the availability of houses for horses in these situations, okay? Generally, you're not going to be able to rehome horses that are going to slaughter, though, because they just end up going to slaughter. So it's really sad. But 200,000, you guys, that's a large number of horses that are unwanted because of irresponsible people purchasing them. I mean, I'm sorry, that's just as blunt as you can possibly be. You know, I mean, the vast majority of people don't take into consideration 99% of everything that I've already gone over in this. 99%. The majority of people who buy horses legitimately come to me and say, I just want a horse. I want a horse. I want to buy one. I've been taking lessons for a few months and I'm ready. I want to buy a horse. Not even kidding. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not kidding. As someone who gave horseback riding lessons to children for multiple years and trained horses and was a barn manager, okay? 99% of people who came to me and said they wanted horses just because they've been riding for a few months and because they want to compete or do whatever. Lease a horse. Trust me, it's way better. So my experiences with Link and bad examples. This is the very last slide, and then we're going to do some questions. So this was, look at how cute we are. Look at how cute we are. This was me, and this was Link. So I know a lot of people are going to say that I'm a hypocrite because I got Link when I was 13. So I want to go over this at the end because yes and no. As someone who owned a horse as a 13-year-old, this is my experience, and this is why I'm telling you, I'm warning you, okay? Don't get a horse, you guys. As someone who had a horse as a kid, don't get one. It's a bad idea. Just take it from my experience. This is not me being hypocritical. This is me sharing my own knowledge and experience as someone who owned a horse as a child. Do not buy a horse as a kid. Don't do it. So I got Link when I was 13. What a lot of people don't know, and maybe a lot of people do know, Link was a rescue. And I can't even tell you, so many people buy rescue horses because they're cheap. Link was $350 as a 2-year-old. I got him as a 2-year-old, completely untouched, untrained, none of that. He was completely untouched and untrained. Horrible. I mean, he was a lot. He was a handful, and he was $350. I can't tell you how much money and how much time I have spent with him just in the first few years of his life training him. I want to say at least $50,000 was spent in training, vet bills, everything like that. And luckily, the vast majority of that I didn't have to pay for because I shadowed vets. And so I knew personally the veterinarian that I was working with and got a lot of my treatment for free. And I want you to take this into consideration because I worked my ass off. I paid for my horse myself from the time that I got him when he was 13 because my family was broke. I did not grow up in a wealthy family, and I bought him myself. He was the only horse I could afford. I could barely afford a lot of his medical bills when I was a little kid. I would do favors for my veterinarian that I shadowed. I would, do vet tech work for free, not as an actual vet tech, but like shadowing, helping, assisting. I would do all of that stuff for free. And in order to get like discounted rates on shit, I also took a farrier course that I saved up the money to do myself with my Christmas money. So that way I could trim his feet myself and not have to pay someone. And on top of that, I worked at the barns that I would board him at. And I would do daily cleanings. I would do assisting with lesson programs, etc., until I was 16 and was able to work and make money. So that way I could get discounts on his board and everything like that. But I paid for my horse myself, okay? And it was a lot of hard work. I was even homeschooled for a year in 8th grade, which was the first year that I got Link, because I was working so much to help pay for him that and training him so much that I couldn't go to school. I had no time to go to school, so I had to do online school. And it was so stressful. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. There were so many moments when I was a kid that I would have much rather done other things than spend time, at 2 a.m. in the morning trying to train my horse who had bit me, or going to the doctors because I had broken tailbones from injuries from my animal that I was sinking so much of my time and money into, who was just beating the shit out of me on a daily basis. So I want to make this very clear that owning a horse is not what it's cracked up to be. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of dedication. It's a lot of time and effort. It's a lot of money. And I would not wish my experiences as a child and a teenager on anybody, because I'm going to be very real. I did not have much of a high school life. I didn't have much of a high school experience. I didn't go to parties. I didn't go to homecoming and prom. I didn't do any of that because of all the time I was spending working at barns, paying for my horse, training my horse, and whatever. I mean, I spent every waking moment trying to pay for my horse and make sure that he had an adequate life and training and whatever. And I would not wish that on anybody. I think that every person should lease horses until they're 16 to 18 years old. I think every person should do that. I obviously don't regret my horse because I love him, but I just think that everyone should do that so they can experience their own lives, and they also don't have to be tied to an animal. And even if your parents are willing to pay for you to have a horse, I don't recommend people do it. Lease horses. It's so much better. And bad examples of this would be Bratalie. Perfect example. So everyone remembers Luna. We haven't talked about Bratalie in a while because literally their horse just vanished off the face of the earth. They don't talk about it. Basically what happens is they got their daughter a pony because she went through 2 months of riding lessons and then decided she wanted a horse or some shit. So they bought her a pony that was completely untrained. Surprise, surprise, they ended up sinking tons of money into the horse's training, and the horse took a very long time to work with and had behavioral problems because it's a normal horse. It's a normal horse. You're going to sink money and time into training any animal. And it's going to take years to actually train a horse to the level and capabilities that you're probably wanting the horse to be at. And that's something a lot of people don't take into consideration. And when they bought Annie a horse, she grew out of it after 6 months or a year or something, and nobody ever heard about the horse ever again. And this is not to place blame on Annie. This is not to place blame on her parents who didn't know any better. This is just an example of what 99% of people do. Okay. And as somebody, again, who's been in the industry for 17 years, this happens more often than not. This happens all the time with so many people. I would honestly say, out of all the lesson kids I worked with, maybe 1 or 2 of them who bought horses still have their horses to this day, which is an extremely low percentage. So just let that sink in for the amount of horses that people dump or rehome or get rid of. Because a lot of people think that they're only going to keep a horse for a few years and get rid of it, and that's totally fine. Horses need to be seen as dogs and cats. If you're going to buy a horse, it needs to become part of your family. It's not something that you can just throw away when you don't want to keep it around anymore, or when it can't do what you want it to do, or when you get sick and tired of it, right? That's not what a horse is. It's part of your family. It's a living animal. And horses have such high turnover rates because people grow out of them. People go on to bigger and better jumping events or cross-country events or faster barrel races or something that their previous horse isn't capable of. And then they get rid of them. And that's a super common thing. It's way more common than people think. And I just think people need to take that into consideration when they get a horse. So let's go back. Let me stop sharing. Hi, let me take a break for just a second, just a breather. Okay. Oh, let me take a breath, you guys. I'm so tired. Okay, let me go into the chat and just kind of see what the fuck is up. Let's do some questions. If anyone has questions, I'm open. Oh my God, everyone's talking about the election. I don't care. I'm so over everything that's happening in the world. 2020 just sucks in general. I don't care. Okay, so if anybody has questions. Oh, I found a good one. I have quite a bit of money saved up to be able to buy a horse in a few years. I want to try other disciplines and go to different stables, but my parents don't want to pay. Should I use my savings? Of course, of course, of course. I think that you should not be saving to buy a horse. That's just going to be my honest opinion. Save your money to lease a horse or take some lessons, you know? Don't save your money to buy a horse because honestly, it's too much stress as a kid. As someone who did that, as someone who saved every dime and penny and worked my ass off to buy a horse and pay for my horse, trust me, don't do it. Don't do it. I would have so much rather, I mean, I love my horse. So obviously I'm not going to say that I would rather not have bought him because I love him and I don't regret getting him, but I would have rather leased a horse during that entire time. It would have been so much less stressful for me. And, you know, I just lease a horse. Okay. Spend your money doing that or spend your money going and trying other disciplines, you know? How did I find Link? Link came into the rescue shelter that I was volunteering at. So that's how I found him. He was rescued from an abandoned piece of land, by the facility, the equestrian facility I was volunteering at the time. Let's see. Opinions on miniature horse driving, AKA I'm thinking of getting into it. That's fine. I mean, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, I want to buy my child a miniature horse. Don't buy kids miniature horses for riding purposes. If you are an equestrian and you want to get into miniature horses, you can buy miniature horses and use them for driving. I don't have a problem with that. I think I go over that in my my previous live stream on ponies and miniature horses, or the Shetland Lie is, I think is what I called it. Let's see. How many horses do you think one person should have? This is such a good question. Such a good question. Thank you for asking that. You know, not to point fingers, because I love all of my equestrian friends, and this is not me calling any of them out, but I do want to say that I think it's a bit ridiculous when one equestrian has more than 3 horses. And this is not me calling anyone out because I love all my equestrian friends, but I just think that there's not very much time you can possibly have for more than 3 horses, right? Considering that you're going out and spending every day of the week with your animals, I would honestly say that one person can't give more than 3 horses an adequate amount of their time. And that's just my opinion. I think you should stick to 3 horses if you're one person. Let's see. One person said, I don't know, I find that leasing or loaning a horse is more stressful because it's not yours. If something happens, you can get blamed by the owner and it seems more stressful. You're not going to be blamed by the owner because anytime you appropriately lease or loan a horse from somebody, you sign what's called liability releases. And liability releases means that the owner of the horse takes full responsibility for any injuries that occur when the rider is riding the horse that they're leasing. Okay. So for example, if I were to lease out Link and the rider who rides him were to injure him, they would not be responsible unless it was intentional. Like if someone intentionally injured my horse, then they would be legally responsible for them. But if it was accidental, let's say someone was jumping Link and he got a knee injury during the jumping session, that would still be on me because they signed a liability release through me when they decided to lease my horse. So anybody who leases or loans a horse has to sign a liability release, which means that the rider's not liable for any of the financial expenses incurred by the owner for veterinary work, etc. So if you're leasing a horse and you're not signing a liability release, don't lease the horse. I don't know why anybody would lease a horse if they weren't signing a liability release. Okay, let's see. My stable makes leasing more expensive than owning in the short term. Stables should not be in control of how much people charge to lease their horses. Leasing a horse is all up to what the owner of the horse wants to charge for leasing the horse. And obviously different horses are going to be leased at different expenses. So if you have a horse that's an extremely high jumping horse, like jumping level horse, and they're leasing it out to people who want to jump at that height, then it's probably going to be more expensive than just an everyday trail riding horse that is available for lease, okay? But at the end of the day, any horse that you lease is cheaper than a horse that you would own, okay? For all the reasons that I've previously gone over. You are going to be paying for so many more expenses annually and monthly by owning a horse. A lot of people look at just the cost of board and then the cost of leasing. And they're like, oh, well, if I buy a horse, the cost of board is $300 a month, let's say, and then leasing a horse is $300 a month or $350, which it is in some places. A lot of places it's cheaper than the actual board. However, even if that's the case, even if you're paying $350 a month to lease a horse and the owner's paying $300 to board the horse, the owner is still paying vastly more for that horse. Trust me. The owner is paying for that horse's deworming every month, food every month, supplements every month, vaccinations every month, farrier work every other month. They're paying for the annual veterinary work every month. They're paying for any other expenses, the tack, all of that, travel expenses. They are paying for the duration of that horse's life versus you having the luxury of being able to move on to a different horse whenever you decide to progress in your riding, okay? And not being financially tied to a horse for the rest of its life. So, what are the red flags at barns to look for? Great question. I love that question because it's so real. Anytime you disagree with a training practice, there were trainers that I just got a bad vibe. Like, a lot of people disagree with vibes or anything like that. I don't. You can easily get a very bad vibe from riding facilities, and I go off that. There were times where I would work with trainers who were very emotionally abusive to their lesson students. Like I had an English trainer when I was, I want to say maybe 10. And she was super emotionally abusive to the lesson students there. Like she would scream at lesson students. That's just not the type of environment that I would want to be around or learn in. And, really, if you just get a bad vibe from a lesson teacher or some other students, maybe there's some toxic behavior, like barns that have certain cliques or exclusions, like they exclude certain people out of certain events or something, barns that are known for abusive training practices, or if you see horses that are maybe a little skinny or have overgrown hooves, those are all things to look out for, because obviously every barn has their own level of care that they provide their horses, and they have their own standards. So go to a barn that you think fits you, and always go around and look around for different places. Let's see. This is a good one. I was saving to buy a horse that was being abused by the stables I was at, but he died. My mom thinks it was better we didn't save him because of the abuse he endured, but I think otherwise. What's your opinion? I think what should have happened is it should have been reported to animal control or some sort of law enforcement organization and had someone come in and remove the horse. I don't think that it's up to everybody to save and rescue horses they see that are injured, because oftentimes people don't take into consideration that the average injured horse costs between $5,000 and $10,000 to rehab appropriately. So unless you have $5,000 to $10,000 to pay for vet bills alone on top of your monthly expenses and board and feed and all that to rehab a horse, then you need to be getting in touch with rescue shelters that have the resources available to afford things like that. So what probably should have happened is law enforcement should have been called and the horse should have been relinquished over to a shelter who could appropriately afford to rehabilitate the horse themselves. And then when the horse was rehabbed, then you could have bought the horse or rescued the horse at that point. And then you don't have to pay for all of those expenses, you know, maybe just some training and upkeep. Okay. All right, I'm gonna do one more and then we should be good to go. A lot of people are talking about, this is the last one I'm going to go over. This one says, if I was going to buy a horse, would it be okay if I bought a horse from slaughter before it dies so I can try and save it? This is something that's a very difficult one, right? Like rescue shelters obviously can't take every horse, but again, I mean, as we previously went over in my presentation, you guys, I think it was like 28% of the reason why, 28% of the reason why people relinquished horses was because they had unforeseen medical circumstances that were untreatable or that people couldn't afford. And 54% of the reason why people relinquished horses was because they had medical expenses incurred or the owners were financially unable to care for them. So, guys, I would honestly say that unless you have $20,000 to $30,000 laying around every single year to pay for a horse, don't buy a horse. So that's a very important thing for a lot of people to consider. I know a lot of people want to be white knights and they want to go out here and rescue horses, which is so great. And I love that. I think it's amazing for people who want to rescue. But honestly, there's a time and a place. And I don't think people should rescue horses until they're an adult and they have $20,000 to $30,000 a year just sitting around that they can spend on an animal they want to bring into their lives. So that's how I'm going to end this. Thank you so much. I hope this didn't dishearten anybody, but I also hope this was educational for anybody who's wondering if they should or shouldn't buy a horse and where you're at in your riding. Again, lessons, leasing, exercise riding, working at barns, shadowing trainers, shadowing veterinarians. These are all things that you can do and you should do before you buy a horse. Okay, so I hope that this helps. I hope everyone enjoyed this. Thank you so much for joining me, you guys. By the way, our hoodies for Keep It 20 just launched today, so I will put that link below. And Coldest Water, thank you for sponsoring this live stream. Again, those links will be below. And any of the links or studies I went over in my live stream will be linked below once this live is re-uploaded officially on my channel. So thank you guys so much. I will see you guys in my next video and my next live streams, which will be much more high quality than this. But I love you guys. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.